Let's get right to it.
Okay, Mike.
It's your story of the week.
Thanks, Mike.
You're welcome, Rob.
Okay, the story of the week
Yes.
is headlined Bristol-Myers zoning change stops sale. And it goes back to February 17th and was authored by Matt Zabarick. And in the story we learned that Bristol-Myers Squibb is saying a change to the town's industrial zone regulations, just recently approved, will prohibit the company from selling its 180-acre campus to an unnamed boarding school. The Planning and Zoning Commission voted recently to eliminate religion, education, and philanthropy as accepted land uses in the I-5, IX industrial zones, and Diane Whitney, who's an attorney representing Bristol-Myers, says the only interest they've had in that campus has come from a boarding school, and now they will no longer be able to move forward with that possible sale.
So why in the world would they make this move? The Planning and Zoning Commission. Why would they make that move according to the reporting?
Right.
Yes.
You know, here's Casey Costello, the town planner, a quote from her.
Okay.
At the end of the day, it's not about whether it's for-profit or non-profit, and that she's responding there to the notion that various town officials said the reason for the zone change is they didn't want a non-profit entity going in there and possibly not paying property taxes. So she says it's not about whether it's a for-profit or a non-profit, pays taxes or doesn't pay taxes. From a regulation standpoint, this is about land uses, according to Casey Costello. So some are saying it's non-profit, for-profit, and then she's chiming in that in her mind this is grounded in land use.
So this is, according to the tip of the iceberg, which is what went on in the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, because I think we're going to try to discuss maybe the bottom of the iceberg in a couple of minutes. But according to the to make a decision like this appeal-proof, because Bristol-Myers in a subsequent article said they're mulling an appeal.
Right.
But to make a decision like this appeal-proof, the Planning and Zoning Commission, I think, needs to point to something other than money. How crass? Money. It's all about money. So if they can say, no, it's not about money, it's about land use, or it's not about money, it's about the plan of conservation and development, you know, that kind of helps the record if and when a judge should look at it. But there are other quotes in the article which I think carries the preponderance of the evidence. It is all about money.
Okay.
This is a school, this particular school that they were talking about is a for-profit school and would pay property tax, and that's in the reporting.
Right. Good point.
But some of the quotes and the motivation of the Economic Development Commission, who presented this and advocated for this, was money. We want to grow the tax base. And we can't grow a tax base if we're having properties like the food bank come in, which is right across the street from Bristol-Myers Squibb, you know, which is a nonprofit. It took a prime piece of property, converted it into this big distribution center for the food bank. They're not paying taxes. They didn't want that to happen again. So this is all about money, but sprinkled through here are some quotes or some positions which, again, may help make it bulletproof if it comes through an appeal. Now, as I understand the state of the law, in order to be taxable, it has to be, or in order to be tax exempt, it has to be both an educational facility and not-for-profit. And here, this school missed one of those categories. It was for-profit, which meant it would be taxable. So, I'm kind of back to my original question. This was going to be taxable. What are they afraid of?
I think it's a good question, and it was something that at least crossed my mind as I was just reading the reporting on the two articles.
Yeah.
So I think you have a good point. It seemed to me like this is a really big campus. You may have trouble finding a buyer, and this town has I think a good history with boarding schools. Choate.
Yeah.
So yeah, why are they against it?
The only thing that I can well, two things that come to mind. One is they're perhaps afraid that if they don't slam the door on nonprofits soon enough, in other words, if they don't stop it now, the town will be too slow to react if a second or third tax-free entity comes in.
But you already have the Connecticut Food Bank
Yeah,
there.
I got Connecticut Food Bank, and that's the only thing that's there right now. So it doesn't, to me, it doesn't add up completely. It's true they don't want to see another nonprofit in that area to lose more money, but I don't think they had to slam the door on all nonprofits this fast.
Yeah.
Because they could have allowed this for-profit school in under current zoning, not change the zoning,
Right.
too quick, allowed them to come in. I think they could have protected that stream of income that would come from that for-profit school in the way of property taxes. They could have protected that forever with adequate contracts and documentations, payments in lieu of taxes that run for the land, et cetera, et cetera. I think they could protect that parcel as a tax-paying parcel. And after this school got established, then they can slam the door on a subsequent nonprofit by changing the zone, if that's
Right.
what they're... so that's... But there may be another reason.
Yeah, I think, and I want, because
Maybe another
well,
reason.
we did learn more about it, but
We
just
did learn
before the other reason I was a little bit confused before I learned a little more about this, and we'll let the viewers in on this.
Yeah,
was
spoiler,
that,
what do you call a spoiler alert?
Right, but because Yale University bought a big industrial complex or an office complex off of I-95 in Milford, Yale West. Seemed to work out well. Sacred Heart bought, I think it was old GE plant somewhere down in Fairfield County. Great. In North Haven, right up the road from me, I'm in Wallingford, but right over the line, Quinnipiac came in and bought the old Blue Cross Blue Shield. So it just seemed like, there seemed to be success. Now, granted, boarding school is not Yale or necessarily Quinnipiac, but there's been success there. I mean, towns have welcomed these reuses of these large facilities because I think in part the office has changed so much. Your office, what is an office? What do you do in your office? Who's in your office? The notion of trying to fill these large spaces with private businesses is difficult.
Well, it seems as though an undercurrent of this decision is that the town of Wallingford, despite the available evidence so far, town of Wallingford is confident that another tax-paying entity will come in. I don't know the basis for that confidence. If you take the reporting at face value, Bristol-Myers said there's been no other buyers on the horizon. So how long is Wallingford willing to wait for its perfect new property, its perfect new customer? And it's not up to the town. It's what the market will bear. It's the market forces. So are they going to, is the town, before it changes its perspective, going to give Bristol-Myers 5 years, 10 years, let it stay vacant for 3 years, 7 years, and kind of force Bristol-Myers' hand in tearing the building down? Or is it the long shot going to come in? I think the Wallingford officials are betting on the long shot. Say no to this tax-paying entity. No one is going to match the taxes paid by Bristol-Myers. That's not going to happen. But by saying no to this tax-paying entity, Wallingford officials are rolling the dice that there will be another tax-paying entity coming down the road that they like better. Now, if you're Bristol-Myers boardroom, Bristol-Myers is probably thinking that decision by the Planning and Zoning Commission cost us $10 million, $20 million, $30 million. We don't know what the purchase price is, or what they're negotiating for, and it probably hasn't been set yet. But it's probably in the order of magnitude, of 10 to 30 million.
Absolutely.
That's a huge amount of money Bristol-Myers is not going to get. For that kind of money, I'd take the appeal. I mean, I don't know, but I mean, it's,
and it points out another.
It's a huge sum.
It points out another aside to this too, because, like a lot of people in town, I've always felt over the years that the town had too cozy of a relationship with Bristol-Myers.
Oh.
And recently, just fairly recently, we had counselors complaining about some refund that Bristol-Myers got on their, I believe it was their electric bill, and as another sign of the cozy relationship. Well, this left me almost feeling sorry for Bristol-Myers, so
right.
and not able to accuse town officials of certainly being too cozy with them.
Well, there may be another reason for this. And in sort of just Googling things and trying to figure this out, because they talked about a boarding school, one step led to another, but we happened to fall upon a story that comes out of West Hartford. Mm-hmm. And the story that comes out of West Hartford from last year is about a school for international students, primarily Chinese students,
right.
That wanted to come into West Hartford, buy a parcel, and set up a private boarding school.
Right.
Now, that was that organization in West Hartford was Wai-Ming, if I'm pronouncing it right, Wai-Ming Inc. or something. We don't know whether Wai-Ming, this Wai-Ming organization, is the same organization that was going to buy the Bristol-Myers property. We don't know that. But what happened in West Hartford is illustrative of a private boarding school and how it may impact the town. So we're not saying there's a connection, but it is illustrative to talk about the Wai-Ming experience, because they have been, maybe aggressive isn't the right word, but they certainly reached out to West Hartford. The West Hartford deal did not go through, my understanding, but it hung by a thread. It was very contentious at West Hartford. West Hartford officials weighed the pros and cons. There were considerable things to say for a Chinese school coming into West Hartford, paying taxes, collaborating with the school system, and there were considerable disadvantages. But that wasn't the only town that the Wai-Ming company reached out to in the Hartford area. So I'm thinking, I wonder if Wai-Ming or a school like Wai-Ming is what happened in Wallingford, and the Wallingford town officials knew about the business model of the school and didn't like the business model, and so decided to change the zone now and slam the door closed. So let's talk a little bit more about what happened in West Hartford. This goes back to the first quarter 2016, and I'm drawing now from an article in the Boston Globe. It got that far. It was that big a story. And the Boston Globe story, I think, relies in context on a movement that's going on across the country of foreign students wanting to come into the United States and getting a USA high school diploma. An American high school diploma is very valuable, I infer from these articles. It's not isolated to West Hartford or maybe Wallingford. It's sort of a phenomenon that's going on. And so the lead sentence in the Boston Globe story goes like this. Dateline, West Hartford. A year ago, the leaders of this quiet suburb found themselves faced with an unusual and highly lucrative proposition. Not saying this could have happened in Wallingford. Not saying that.
Right.
But let's talk about West. Okay. A Chinese company wanted to build an international academy in town, then funnel hundreds of students from the academy into local public high schools where students would pay thousands in tuition to the district and pay taxes. Local officials saw a potential windfall of private money and an antidote to the school's declining enrollment. Wallingford has a declining enrollment, and that was part of the basis for Governor Malloy's proposed cut to Wallingford school aid. Enrollment's down. Remember that story?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially here in Wallingford.
Here in Wallingford, yeah. As radical as the proposition was, it quickly moved forward in West Hartford. In addition, I'm skipping a bit in the article, local residents raised concerns about entangling public schools with a foreign company whose primary goal is profit. They also wonder how the arrival of several hundred foreign students might impact classes, athletics, and competition in admissions. The article goes on to explain the model in West Hartford was that the Chinese students would go to this private school for, I think it was 3 years, but it might have been 2 years. And at the end of, I'm going to use 3 years as an example because we're only using West Hartford as an example. They would go to the private boarding school for 3 years, and then after 3 years, enter the West Hartford public school system. They would pay tuition, and this goes on to say that there's a federal law that requires the school, the private school, to reimburse the town for its costs in educating the foreign students. And there was also opportunities for exchanges, of student exchanges and faculty exchanges, and it's very sort of forward-leaning, you know, trips to China and interviews, and it progressed quite far.
Right.
But it didn't succeed. Your thoughts?
Well, just so too, people I think understand that we're not completely speculating on this. I mean, we've been doing, Matt Zabarick has been doing some additional reporting on this. We certainly haven't published anything, but based on my conversation with him, I mean, I'm 100% certain, or 99.9% certain, that it was a school that would mostly have foreign students.
Okay.
And I'm 90% certain that most of those students would be Chinese. I'm also sure, well, we contact the Wyoming Education Group.
Good.
They said it's not them. So, but it does appear to be something similar to them. So I just want people to know we're not completely speculating here.
So if you're a town official and you just don't like the complications of a school with Chinese students, predominantly Chinese students coming into town, even though they pay taxes, and they could pay taxes, it could be worked out, that property pays taxes forever. You just don't like, the model, you could send the word down, let's change the zone and stop it now, and we'll, and the real reason is not the money. They don't object to the money. The town doesn't object to the money. It's the business model. But, yeah.
Yeah, and I can see, because when I had first, this is not Yale, this is not Quinnipiac, this is not Sacred Heart, this is not Choate. Okay, so I think what may complicate, what town officials may have been concerned about, and I can certainly understand it, I'm not saying I agree with it, but is apparently with this model here, you're having foreign students at this school for a couple of years, and then they're going to move to the public high schools. So this is not Choate is not dependent on sending students to Wallingford Public Schools. Choate is an entity unto itself. This school, you would have to have just an agreement beyond a sale and beyond the normal. You'd have to have an arrangement with public schools, and that certainly complicates things.
Let me digress.
Okay.
Staying on Bristol-Myers,
all right.
But let me digress to something we didn't have a chance to chat about at all before. At what point do the Wallingford public officials kind of give up, throw up their hands, and say, let's do residential real estate?
Oh.
Let's open it. How long is this going to stay a vacant property or a big behemoth of a building before anything happens? What does it matter? Money is money. They say, well, no, we have to strengthen our industrial commercial base. But that's because of the money. It's not because anyone likes the look of industrial structures more than anything else.
Yeah.
And you could make an argument, well, we want kids going into the school system. I don't think that's what's going on. I don't think that's because on the one hand they talk about economic development and people moving into town to work at these, to work at these commercial or industrial facilities. So, I don't know. Nothing much has changed out there in a long, long time. There's been a property in back of the Hilton Garden Inn, that the owners really want to do development. They've been complaining forever that zoning is too restrictive. Nothing has seemed to be moving. You keep doing the same thing year after year after year after year after year, hoping the market's going to change. It seems to me the market is sort of going in the opposite direction from where the Wallingford public officials want the market to go. You can't control the market. You can't, with a magic wand, say, I want the perfect, clean, industrial use, and poof, it's there. You can't create a market if it isn't there, but I rambled.
No, not at all. In fact,
yeah.
I found that interesting because I hadn't considered it. But do you think that the Bristol-Myers property, because of its proximity to 68 and the highway exit, and doesn't Bristol-Myers abut residential development?
In the back, yeah.
In the back. Okay,
Yep.
so I just want to make sure. I do think.
There's a power line in back, and then residential
Okay,
properties.
but I do think 68, the highway exit, and make that property probably have more potential for residential, probably apartments in this market, because in Meriden they were very successful building apartments right off of 91, and that seems to be where the market is, and so...
Let me add this fact.
Go ahead.
So if you're lucky enough to get an apartment or a condominium of the top floor of Bristol-Myers, you get the sunset. It faces west.
Yeah,
you can't buy that in some spots.
No,
you know?
it really isn't. It also plays into...
This is heresy.
No.
We should cut this out of the final version of the Citizen Mike Show. This is terrible.
Professionals who want to get on and off the highway,
Yeah.
that are going to Hartford or New Haven.
Prime
or
location.
Right, it's a prime. So I thought that was an interesting.
Prime location. Let's move on.
Yeah.
So,